Is a research associate at the Afro-Middle East Center, AMIC, in Johannesburg, and she now joins us from our Pretoria studios. Miriam, thank you so much for joining us, and good evening. Is there any truth in state accusations against the media?
Thank you so much for having me. I think before we go on to a discussion about the fairness of the trials and whether or not there is a basis, we need to contextualize the fact that the media has definitely been one of the most affected institutions by the attempted coup of 15th July. Reason being that the media in general in Turkey has for a very long time been dominated by political institutions. And previous to the 15th of July, it was in fact dominated by those who had some links to the Gulen movement to some extent, but also to secular and if you want to say, anti-Islamist leanings in terms of their outreach. So those media outlets actually had quite a dominant voice in the mainstream media at the time. Following the 15th of July coup, the state seems to have taken on the route to pursuing its case against the FETÖ or the Fethullah Gulen movement through the media and looking at journalists involved in those media outlets. For example, the Zaman newspaper, which apparently was one of the very highly and very well circulated papers in Turkey, was closed down. But on closer inspection, one also realizes that the extent to which those outlets actually aimed to destabilize, to a certain extent, the political institutions within Turkey has actually become more and more of an issue within the political spectrum. So unfortunately, post 15th July, the media have actually become very much a part of the contestation of ideologies in Turkey.
Now, Miriam, let's just look at 130 journalists arrested. Will they get a fair trial?
You know, this is really a very pertinent question right now, because everybody is concerned about the extent to which the emergency law can actually provide some semblance of procedure or rule of law within Turkey. But I have to say that we must go back again to the context. If we are talking about a state that is under an emergency law, the state does actually have that right. And what would then be a cross-check over the arrests and over the detentions is the assurance that the judiciary is actually impartial. And I think that is where the crucial point lies. To what extent will we be able to see an independent judiciary, particularly within the current environment? And I am actually optimistic that based on the noises that have come out of the legal fraternity, that actually it is in the interest of the Turkish Republic right now to lay down some assurances to the citizenry that actually all of these arrests are not going to be in vain, that actually they will be pursued with the due process of law.
Now, Miriam, you touched on the issue of a lot of the media being politically sort of affiliated, and that purge that is currently taking place or has taken place since the July 15 coup attempt has sort of just spread everyone and brought everyone into one fold, with arrests and all of that taking place. Most of these media houses seem to be Kurdish owned. Is this true, and are they within their rights to sort of work this way to ensure that Turkey ensures that they go back to what they used to be, or is the media in the right?
Okay, I think it's very important from the outset to understand that those institutions that are being targeted are actually from various different they basically cover the spectrum of political ideologies in Turkey. The only common link, in my view, and according to other academics that have been delving into this issue far more deeply than myself, is that they have at some point a link with the Fethullah Gulen movement in terms of either promoting his ideology or in terms of minimizing the state's actions against fighting terrorism, for example, against ISIL and so on. So to say that it has only been Kurdish outlets that are targeted is actually incorrect. One must also understand that Kurdish language newspapers and Kurdish language radio stations and media were actually only really given a right quite recently, and that is only around 2013, 2012, around that time, when the resolution process was actually still underway between the PKK, the Kurdish PKK, and the state. Unfortunately, because of what's happened now following the coup attempt, where really the nation of Turkey has become quite polarized in its perception of how to go forward, because they have, the Syrian crisis to the south, they have the issue of Iraq to the east, they have the internal turmoil between the ruling Justice and Development Party and the opposition parties, who do not necessarily support Turkey's support of refugees from Syria and Turkey's open door policy towards the refugees from Syria. So, there are lots of issues that are currently at play right now. So I wouldn't necessarily just say that it's got to do with Kurdish outlets, but I do agree that it's actually quite important for Turkey right now at this juncture to take the opportunity to begin dialogue about what is going on, rather than taking the defensive and shutting down.
Now, more than 100,000 people had already been sacked or suspended, and about 37,000 arrested. Is this not creating a security problem within Turkey?
I think when we look at the question of security, one has to understand that Turkey has been the recipient or has been the victim of several waves of attacks very recently from ISIL, from the Southern Front, from those who are opposed to Turkey's involvement in the Syrian crisis. So actually the security situation within Turkey is not just limited to the domestic issue. By arresting journalists and academicians, I'm not quite sure how that would alleviate the security situation. As you say, it might actually form a resentment, a civil discontent, which is definitely an issue which the state should really take into consideration, not taking away, of course, from the fact that there are very real issues underlying the question of the parallel state, which is what the state has called the Gulen movement's aims in Turkey, was to create a parallel institution. So certainly the security issue, in my view, would come up if this movement, or if the civil discontent around the way in which the state is proceeding against the Gulen movement galvanizes into something much, much bigger.
Now, finally, Miriam, mentioning Fethullah Gulen, what are the chances of the U.S. handing him over? He's currently based in the U.S.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the U.S. has been receiving information from Turkey on, what Turkey sees as his involvement in the coup attempt. Certainly, the United States' own institutions like the FBI and the CIA have actually been investigating Gulen themselves prior to the coup attempt. In my view, I don't think it's necessarily here or there whether or not he is handed over. At this point, I don't think it will be that likely. But I think what is more important is the democratic consolidation that happens, in the future and very much in the near future. As we've discussed now, polarization within the society must not reach a point of no return, which is what has happened in Syria and unfortunately in Iraq. Turkey has always been a place in which sectarianism has never really reared its head. However, should the answer, the solution be seen from a security lens or from a militaristic lens, we might then see a further polarization of society. And in that case, it really is neither here or there whether Gulen is handed over.
Miriam, thank you so much for joining us. We have to leave it there for now. That was Miriam Juma, Research Associate at the Afro Middle East Center, AMIC, in Johannesburg, and she was joining us live.